per diem leasing is, it's a type of lease contract that is established, which is really utilized for rail cars. In particular, a lot of box cars utilize per diem leasing. And it's a way that for railroad marked cars, so with the car mark on the side of the car for a railroad, it allows that car to travel on all of the different railroads and have a negotiated rate. So when another railroad is using that car, they pay for the ability to use that car. So the railroads don't invest in the cars, private investors invest in the cars, and that allows them, the per diem allows them to charge as they go on different railroads for the use of the car. So the per diem rates are basically paid by an hourly rate as well as a per mile rate. So each rail car has a negotiated rate for a certain amount of money per hour and then a certain amount of money per mile. So as the car travels, the mileage adds up, and then as the car's on a railroad for a given number of hours, the hourly rates are charged accordingly. So, and those rates are what's used to then pay the car owner for the car. So it's really important because in boxcars in particular, the short line railroads really feed the big class 1 railroads. So they are the first and the last mile deliverers and shippers of goods, and they have different capital structures than the class 1 railroads, so they can't necessarily afford to invest in rail cars. So this method gives them an opportunity to lease a rail car from MRC and then be able to earn the per diem earnings on that car to pay for it, so that they can provide rail cars and have access to rail cars for their customers to be able to ship goods across the country. Well, the per diem system was established back in the early 80s, and basically when they deprescribed the pricing for railroads, which had been regulated and set by the government, they put in the per diem system. And this was a way for the rail cars to be more closely associated with a market-driven rate for the use of the rail cars, to help the railroads out and let the rate fluctuate based on the usage of the rail cars and demand for the rail cars. So the default rate is actually when there is no negotiated rate between two railroads, the default rate is the rate that's used on that car, and every car gets assigned a default rate when it's built new. So that default rate is used. There's 280 plus railroads in the US, so there's typically not a negotiated rate between every railroad for every car. So that's why the default rate is used. So the default rate is actually set up, which is a little crazy. It's set up based on the lowest negotiated hourly rate for a rail car in the quarter before that rail car was built. So when that rail car gets built, this quarter, the lowest negotiated rate from the previous quarter is what establishes that default rate. And in some cases, that can be as low as 5 cents an hour or 17 cents an hour. First of all, the default rates aren't sufficient to be able to compensate for new car investment. New cars have gone up in price since 1980. They were around $75,000. They're now around $165,000 for a new box car. So the default rate won't compensate a car owner efficiently. And about 25% of all rates charged are default rates on current railroads. The other thing is they're subject to manipulation. So the railroads negotiate these rates with each other, and over time, those rates remain suppressed. So over the last 30 years, the negotiated rate for 50-foot box cars has been around 5 cents an hour. The negotiated rate for 60-foot box cars has been around 17 cents an hour, and they haven't changed. It's the only price in the world that hasn't changed in the last 30 years. And then finally, it really suppresses the ability to negotiate a higher negotiated rate because you're anchored into this alternative rate. If you don't negotiate a rate, you're going to get the default rate. And the only alternative you have is arbitration, which is very expensive to go through the arbitration process. Yeah, I think the part that really makes them unfair and kind of reduces competition is that the private car owners are required to use the per diem system in the car hire system, whereas railroad-owned TTX does not have to participate in the car hire system. So they get to charge their rates by fiat and can charge whatever rates they want to charge for hourly rates and mileage rates. That allows them to get adequate returns on investment when they put boxcars into the market, where private car owners can't get an adequate return on investment because of the default rate and the lower negotiated rates. In some cases, TTX rates are almost 40% higher than the average negotiated rate for boxcars, which that's the difference that makes it unfair. Long term, the real issue is that it's going to eliminate and reduce competition for boxcars in the market, because private investors will no longer be able to invest. As those cars retire, TTX will take larger and larger market share within that, and then they will dominate and control the market. Back in April, the Railway Supply Institute, RSI, submitted a petition for the equipment lessors that are members of RSI to the STB, the Surface Transportation Board. And they asked them to reopen the car hire rules to be able to address the default rate situation. STB has really been engaged in the issue. They've strongly encouraged both the AAR as well as the Railway Supply Institute to come to a commercial arrangement and an agreement on this issue. In the meantime, the Railway Supply Institute has been working with members of Congress to send letters to the STB, and have had several letters sent to the STB in support of the petition that we have submitted. So really good progress. Not a lot of progress early, but recently AAR has established their Equipment Asset Committee and had that committee open up a docket to review Rule 25, which is where the default rate rules are established. And they have invited RSI to participate in that task group. So that task group will be kicking off here late this spring. And the expectation is that they will have a recommendation to the AAR by the end of October on potential changes to the car hire rules. So we're very excited about the opportunity to engage with the AAR on this issue and hopefully get some resolution to this issue within the year.